Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm so grateful you've chosen to give me some of your time today as I talk about the board games I played in February 2022. Let's get straight into it. February was another decent month for gaming, thanks in large part to my friend who has become my primary two-player gaming partner. And he and I started off the month with 3 games. We played first Shadows in Kyoto, which is this tiny little, practically pocket-sized game that is a game I would recommend to anybody who played and enjoyed Stratego when they were growing up. If you remember Stratego, it's a game where you each had your little army of pieces that were facing you only, and your opponent could only see the backs of the pieces and didn't know which piece was what army unit, and you would have them meet up with the opponent's pieces and they would clash and take them out or be taken out, and you were attempting to find the opponent's flag. Now, some years ago, famed game designer Reiner Knizia took that sort of Stratego framework and made a game called Lord of the Rings: The Confrontation, which was really cool. It was sort of like a pared down Stratego. There weren't nearly as many pieces, but the pieces you had were sort of the Fellowship versus the forces of Sauron's evil crew. And so it was a really neat game. Each of the characters, each of the individual pieces had its own little special ability, which added to the interest of the game. And so then along comes Shadows in Kyoto that sort of takes this a step further in sort of condensing it down even further. On each side, I think there are only about 6 pieces that a player has to work with. And it's a spy versus spy situation. So 2 of your characters are carrying real intelligence and the other 4 are carrying fake intelligence. And the goal of the game is to get one of your characters who are carrying the real intelligence over to the opponent's side of the board, or you could also win if your opponent captures too many of your characters that have fake intelligence, or you might capture both of your opponent's real intelligence spies, in which case you could also win. So there's a few interesting ways to win the game. There are some kind of small special abilities and equipment cards that can come into play. This one is a card-based game, so the cards determine how you move your pieces on the board, and there's that just fun aspect of you can see your own pieces, but your opponent can't until they run into them with their own pieces, and then information is potentially revealed. It's a simple, very fast-playing game, and I think it's a really interesting game. I give it a rating of 7 out of 10. It's one that I would like to explore more because I don't know how much of it is just getting lucky in terms of running into the right piece at the right time versus how much strategy is involved. How much can you really pull out information from your opponent's side? I'm not exactly sure what the kind of ratio of luck to strategy and tactics there is in there, and it's one that I would definitely enjoy exploring more if I had the opportunity to do so. So, Shadows in Kyoto, solid 7 out of 10. Next up, we played another tiny little game called The Builder's Antiquity, which is kind of an updated edition of a game that was called The Builder's Middle Ages. And it's quite a simple card game where you are recruiting workers and using them to build buildings and attempting to end up with the most victory points when the end game is triggered. I enjoyed the game, I enjoyed the artwork of the game, but in the grand scheme of things, I only give it a 6 out of 10, which is good, but not particularly great. I find the more I play the game, the more I find that the number of really interesting decisions a player has to make is kind of limited. It feels to a certain extent like each time you play the game, you're kind of going to go after the same things and sort of build up your workforce in a similar manner. And in terms of buildings and workers that are available, there might be things that are more obvious than others to choose from. So in terms of deep decision making, that's not really present in the game, but it is a light and enjoyable experience that I should probably pull out with my kids one of these days, because it's definitely one that they could handle. So The Builder's Antiquity by Frederick Henry is a good little game. The third game we played the first time my friend and I got together was Can't Stop. This is a classic, very simple push your luck game where players are rolling dice, trying to use the results of the dice to move up on tracks, and the players are allowed to roll the dice as many times as they want on their turn in order to move up these pegs on the tracks. But if they bust out, out, they lose all the progress they made on their turn. So it's purely a push your luck game where you're trying to advance each turn enough to beat the other player, but without busting out and winding up falling behind. It's an extremely simple game, very quick playing, and it's just purely fun. I rate the game 7.5 out of 10 because there's nothing about the game that's going to blow your mind. It's just all about the fun and the laughter of watching your opponent or yourself bust out when you're trying to get just that little bit too greedy there. And hey, I just enjoy chucking dice in general, so Can't Stop is a great little game. These next two games are games that I played two-player, but this time it was with my older son, Evan. And the first game we played was Star Realms by Darwin Castle and Robert Dougherty. This is a pure deck building game that I talked about last time with my games I played in January. So if you want to see more detail about Star Realms, check out that earlier video there. It is a game that I have rated 6.5 out of 10. It is a good deck builder. The decision making on each turn is often fairly obvious, but for fans who just want a one-on-one space battling game, getting your opponent down to 0 life, using a very simple and basic deck building mechanism, this is a great choice as a little card game. The second card battling game that he and I played, where you're trying to get your opponent down to 0 life, is the classic Magic the Gathering. We pulled out some of the decks that I've built and had a couple of games. It's pretty fun because my son has been getting into playing Magic with one or two of his local friends here, and so it's been neat to watch him explore the game kind of on his own with his friends. But it's a game that I rate 7.5 out of 10, largely on the enjoyment I get out of building decks. The game itself has its issues with the way it manages mana and card play. After creating a deck and putting it together, a lot of the success of your card play is going to come down to the cards you happen to draw at a given time. So a lot of the actual gameplay comes down to drawing good cards and hoping for the best in that regard. But there's so much enjoyment to me to be had in just taking a huge number of cards and putting together my own little 60 card deck and see how it plays out. So because of that, I do have a lot of fun with the game, and it's not like I find it boring or unenjoyable to play. It's still a fun game to play, especially when I'm playing with a deck that I've built. So Magic for me is a solid 7.5 out of 10. Before I get into my final game session of the month, let me just send out a real quick and heartfelt thank you to my Patreon supporters, especially to my higher tier supporters, Joanna, Osmandas Perfect, Paul, and Mojo Dam. Your support helps me to keep going. It really means a lot to me, and I just want to take the time to thank you for it. Now, the final gaming session in February was another two-player session with my friend, and the first game we pulled out was a game called Steam Torpedo, First Contact, designed by Ludovic Rowdy and Bruno Sauter. This is a two-player game where you each have a submarine that's made up of 10 tiles that each represent a compartment in the submarine, and you have a crew of 5 submariners who are running around the submarine, activating the special ability of the rooms to attack the opponent's submarine and ultimately attempting to destroy it and send it to the bottom of the sea. This is a highly tactical game that I don't think really has a luck element to it at all once you start playing it. But the game that my friend and I played against each other, I won the absolute narrowest of victories because there's this timing mechanism in the game where your submarine has only so much oxygen in it, and each turn that goes by, your oxygen supply depletes, and also getting damaged can deplete your oxygen as well. So I had one single oxygen remaining, and I won by 1 damage point just before I ran out of oxygen. So I won this narrow victory. It was pretty fun and exciting. I think this is a great game, and I rate it 8 out of 10. But nobody that I play with seems to enjoy it nearly as much as I do, which is such a shame because I have both of the expansions that are available for the game that add a whole bunch of new compartments that you can use to build your submarine with. It adds special crew members that have their own little abilities, and I've only ever played the game using the predetermined submarine setup where you have 10 specific tiles in a specific orientation and that's what you play with. But there's this whole other element to the game where you can do a drafting mechanism before you begin play, where players take turns choosing available tiles that they will use to make their submarine, and then once they have their tiles, then they can put them together in whatever orientation they like to make their own custom built submarine, and then take that to battle against the other player, much like the Magic the Gathering mechanism that I enjoy, where I can build my own deck and bring it to play against an opponent. The same can be done with Steam Torpedo, but I've never got an opponent that enjoyed the game enough to explore it in that manner with me, to where they would play multiple plays of the game and try building submarines against each other. So unfortunately, there's this whole other aspect to the game that has remained unexplored by me, and I don't know if I'll ever find a person to try it out with, but it is there, and regardless, I think it's a really interesting game that I obviously rate quite highly. The final game we played was called Haggis, which clearly speaks to my Scottish heritage. My mum's dad was Scottish, and when I was in my early 20s, I actually got to travel to Scotland and visit my relatives who live in Dundee and in Portree on the Isle of Skye, so that was an amazing experience. My grandfather is somebody who I admire a lot. He's still alive at the age of 96 now, or 97. He fought with the Montreal Black Watch Infantry Regiment in the Second World War and helps to liberate Europe during the war. So he's a bit of a hero of mine. So the Scottish theme appeals to me, even though the theme itself has nothing whatsoever to do with this very abstract card game that is all about trick-taking and ladder climbing. So it is somewhat unique in the fact that it is a trick-taking ladder climbing game that can be played with just two players, and plays very well with two, in fact. I got absolutely smoked by my friend, something like 350 points to 150 or something ridiculous, but I did enjoy the process, and it left me wanting to explore it more. It is a game where you're playing hand after hand, you're dealing up cards, playing them out, scoring points, dealing out again, playing more, scoring more points until the player reaches a certain point level. Playing to 350 with two players seems to be quite a long game. I think this game can be played with 2 or 3 players, and I can't imagine playing up to 350 points with 3 players. That would just go on for such a long time. But regardless, it is an enjoyable game, especially for players who enjoy sort of classic trick-taking and card games. And it works very well with 2. I rated the game 7 out of 10. In general, I'm not really big into standard card games. I do very much enjoy Texas Hold'em poker, and in the past I've really enjoyed playing euchre when we have 4 people available to play some sort of classic partnership euchre. But besides that, I don't play a lot of basic card games. I do tend to enjoy thematic board games. I'm not huge into card games in general or abstract games, but despite all that, I did really enjoy playing Haggis. So that wraps up my board gaming for February. I am very curious to hear what you've been playing. I always want to know what games you're recommending lately. Have you tried anything new? Please do tell me all about it in the comments. I'm very much interested in hearing about it. And thank you so much for watching. The preceding video has been brought to you free of charge by me, Josh. The only thing I ask in return is that you could do one of the following: give me a thumb up, push the subscribe button, or share the link to this video with somebody who you think would enjoy it. Cheers. On that, which is a kind of a, who the f designed magic? First Contact, designed by Ludovic Sauter, Ludovic Rowdy, and Bruno Sauter. And I can't imagine playing up to 350 points so that it doesn't lose, especially to